I stared at the wedding invitation in my hands, my fingers trembling. The paper felt heavy, expensive, exactly what I'd ordered. But something was wrong. My mother's name sat at the center in bold gold letters, massive and impossible to miss. Mine? Shoved into the bottom corner like an afterthought, like a footnote in my own wedding. Heat flooded my chest. The heirloom necklace, the diamond bracelets, passed down for 5 generations. She expected to wear them, to shine at my wedding like it was hers. My knuckles went white as I gripped the envelope. What the hell just happened to me? My name is Clara. I'm 28 years old. And this was the moment I realized my family had been using me my entire life. I collapsed into the velvet chair by the window, heart slamming against my ribs. My fiancé, Marcus, touched my shoulder gently, but I couldn't look at him, couldn't speak. The invitation blurred in my vision as tears threatened to spill. But I wouldn't cry. Not yet. Anger coiled in my stomach, hot and slow like lava. All those years of being the good daughter, the responsible one, the one who never complained. And this was my reward? Being erased from my own celebration? I forced myself to breathe. In. Out. Slowly. My mind started working again, sharp and clear. I could hand her what she wanted. Let her parade around in those heirlooms like she owned them. Or I could finally take control. The choice crystallized in that moment. I chose myself. Memories flooded back, sharp and painful. I was 7 years old, standing in the kitchen with a perfect report card. All A's. Mom barely glanced at it before turning to my younger sister Vanessa, praising her for a single B+. You worked so hard, sweetie, she'd gushed, while my achievements lay forgotten on the counter. That pattern never changed. When I got into college, Mom threw a small dinner. When Vanessa got her driver's license, Mom threw a party with 50 guests. Every success of mine was minimized, shrunk down until it felt like nothing. Every accomplishment of Vanessa's was celebrated like a miracle. I learned early to stay quiet, to not expect attention, to be grateful for scraps. The resentment had simmered for 21 years. Today, it would finally have somewhere to go. I walked to my bedroom safe, each step deliberate and calm. The combination spun under my fingers. Inside, the velvet boxes containing the family jewelry gleamed in the dim light. The sapphire necklace had belonged to my great-great-grandmother. The diamond bracelets were over a century old. Mom had been talking about wearing them for months, assuming I'd hand them over without question. I closed the safe door. Click. The sound felt final, powerful. No announcement. No dramatic confrontation. Just a quiet, deliberate message that she would understand eventually. I wasn't hers to manipulate anymore. The jewelry would stay locked away until I decided otherwise. And right now, I decided she didn't deserve to touch them. My hand rested on the cool metal of the safe, and for the first time in weeks, I felt completely in control. My phone buzzed. A text from Vanessa. Mom is asking why she isn't seated at the head table. What's going on? I smiled despite myself. Of course she was asking. Of course she assumed she'd be front and center at my wedding, controlling everything from her throne. The entitlement was predictable, almost boring. I'd spent weeks planning the seating chart, carefully placing Mom at a side table with distant cousins she barely spoke to. Not hidden, but not prominent. Not in control. I typed back a simple response. The seating is final. She's exactly where she should be. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. Vanessa didn't know what to say. Neither did Mom, apparently because no response came. The silence felt like victory. I set my phone down and returned to my wedding binder, flipping through pages of carefully planned details. Each one represented a choice Mom couldn't override. Dinner that night was tense. Mom sat across from me at her dining table, wine glass in hand, eyes sharp and calculating. She hadn't mentioned the invitation yet, but I could feel her frustration radiating across the space between us. I kept my expression neutral, my posture straight, my hands folded calmly in my lap. Every movement was controlled, deliberate. Marcus sat beside me, sensing the tension but staying quiet. Mom's jaw tightened when I refused her attempts at small talk, when I didn't rise to her passive-aggressive comments about wedding traditions. The air felt electric, charged with unspoken conflict. She wanted a reaction. I gave her nothing but composed silence. Her frustration grew with each passing minute, and I felt it like static electricity crackling across my skin. When dessert came, she'd barely touched her food. I ate mine slowly, savoring each bite and each moment of her discomfort. The wedding planner, a sharp woman named Beatrice, leaned close during our next meeting. "Your mother tried calling me yesterday," she whispered. "Wanted to change the seating chart, the flower arrangements, even the menu." I wasn't surprised. Mom had been trying to control my wedding from the moment Marcus proposed. Beatrice's eyes were kind but knowing. "She's trying to gaslight you, make you doubt your own decisions. I've seen it before." Relief flickered through me. Someone else could see it. Someone else understood that this wasn't normal mother-daughter tension. This was manipulation, control, a lifetime of making me small so she could feel big. Beatrice squeezed my hand. "Don't let her win. This is your day." The validation made everything easier to bear. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't overreacting. I was finally standing up for myself. We spent the next hour going over every detail, making sure Mom had no opening to insert herself where she didn't belong. The dress fitting was torture. Vanessa stood beside Mom, both of them watching as the seamstress pinned my gown. Mom's voice was sugar-sweet, but her words cut deep. "You know, Clara, you'll regret not letting me wear the necklace. It's been in our family for generations. People will talk if I don't have it." I met her eyes in the mirror, my expression carefully neutral. "People can talk all they want," I said quietly. My breath stayed even, controlled. Nothing would leave that safe. Not for her. Not anymore. Mom's face tightened, her smile turning brittle. Vanessa looked away, uncomfortable. The panic was starting to bloom in Mom's chest. I could see it in the way her fingers twisted together, in the slight tremor of her wine glass later that evening. The seamstress worked silently, pretending not to notice the tension, but I saw her small smile of approval reflected in the mirror. Even strangers could see I was doing the right thing. The family group chat exploded. Notifications pinged endlessly, one after another, a drumbeat of pressure. "What jewelry will Mom wear?" "Clara, you need to give her the heirlooms. This is tradition. You can't break it." Aunt Helen, Uncle James, even distant cousins I barely knew weighed in, all of them pushing me to surrender. I read every message. Then I muted the chat and set my phone down. Silence was my weapon now. Each unanswered ping tightened the tension around Mom's expectations, around her assumed control. She'd enlisted the whole family to pressure me, thinking I'd cave like I always had before. But I'd spent 28 years caving. 28 years making myself smaller, so everyone else could feel bigger. Not anymore. The silence grew louder than any argument I could have made. Marcus watched me from across the room, concern in his eyes. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded. "I'm perfect." I coordinated the bridesmaids' jewelry separately, choosing delicate pieces that complemented their dresses without overshadowing mine. My efficiency was calm, methodical, professional. Every decision was made without Mom's input, without her approval. She called twice during the planning session. I didn't answer. The bridesmaids noticed, exchanging glances but saying nothing. They could feel the shift, the quiet power I was claiming with each micro-decision. When Mom finally reached me that evening, her voice was tight with barely controlled rage. "Clara, we need to talk about the jewelry situation." I let the pause stretch, deliberate and uncomfortable. "There's nothing to discuss," I said simply. "Everything is already arranged." The click of her hanging up echoed in my ear. Each small victory added up, built momentum, gave me strength I didn't know I had. My best friend Amy texted me later. "You're glowing lately. Wedding planning looks good on you." She had no idea it wasn't the wedding. It was the freedom. Mom cornered me at a family lunch 2 weeks before the wedding. She leaned across the table, her voice sharp despite the pleasant restaurant atmosphere around us. "Clara, you can't do this to me. You're embarrassing me in front of the entire family." I met her gaze, evenly, my heart steady. "I can," I said, and I did. The pause that followed felt enormous, heavy with years of unspoken resentment. Her chest rose and fell rapidly, anger and disbelief warring on her face. She'd never expected me to stand up to her, never imagined her obedient daughter would finally say no. The shock in her eyes said more than any words could. Marcus reached under the table and squeezed my hand. I squeezed back, drawing strength from his support. Mom stood abruptly, her chair scraping loudly. She left without another word. Victory tasted bitter and sweet at the same time. The waiter approached nervously, asking if everything was okay. "Everything's perfect," I told him, meaning it. Aunt Helen called, her voice dripping with false concern. "Clara, sweetheart, I'm worried about you. Your mother is very upset. You need to respect your elders, especially at a time like this." I listened quietly, letting her lecture wash over me without reaction. When she finally paused for breath, I spoke calmly. "Aunt Helen, respect goes both ways. I've respected Mom my entire life. It's time she respected my decisions." Helen sputtered, unprepared for pushback. "But the jewelry, it's tradition." "Traditions can change," I replied, "and I'm changing this one." The silence on the other end was deafening. She had no response, no argument that could counter simple truth. When she hung up moments later, I felt lighter. Each confrontation I survived made me stronger, more certain. My silence and calm were louder than their collective anger. They couldn't manipulate what they couldn't shake. I made myself tea and sat in the evening quiet, enjoying the peace that came with standing firm. I decided to apply gentle pressure. During a conversation about wedding costs, I casually mentioned the money Mom had borrowed from me 3 years ago. $5,000 she'd never repaid, had never even acknowledged. "Remember when I helped you with that mortgage payment?" I asked sweetly. "I never asked you to pay it back." Mom flinched like I'd slapped her. Her face went pale, then flushed red. It wasn't cruelty. It was strategy. A reminder that she owed me, that our relationship wasn't the one-sided street she'd paved. She stammered something about being grateful, about planning to repay me soon. I smiled gently. "Take your time," I said, but we both knew what I meant. Every favor she'd forgotten, every debt she'd ignored, every time she'd prioritized Vanessa over me, it was all there between us now, visible and undeniable. The power had shifted. She left my apartment shortly after, and I watched her car pull away, feeling something settle in my chest. Not guilt, relief. Vanessa called, her voice uncertain. We'd been close once, before Mom's favoritism drove a wedge between us. "Clara," she said quietly, "Mom's really upset. She won't stop talking about the jewelry." I waited, letting her continue. She said, "You always get away with being difficult." The words hung in the air, giving me unexpected insight. So that's how Mom framed it. My reasonable boundaries were being difficult. My self-respect was rebellion. Vanessa's accidental honesty gave me leverage I hadn't expected. "Vanessa," I said carefully, "do you think it's fair that Mom has controlled every aspect of my life, but now I'm difficult for wanting control over my own wedding?" Silence. She had no answer. "I love you," I continued, "but I'm done being the easy daughter. It's cost me too much already." When we hung up, something had shifted between us two. Maybe for the better. Maybe she was finally starting to see what I'd lived with for so long. Wedding week arrived like a storm. The house filled with relatives, last-minute calls, whispered complaints in corners. Mom's social leverage was evaporating, and she didn't even realize it yet. She bustled through the chaos, trying to reclaim control through sheer force of personality. But I'd planned too carefully. Every detail was locked down, every decision finalized. She tried to change the florist. I'd already paid in full. She tried to adjust the music playlist. The DJ had explicit instructions to ignore anyone but me. She tried to rearrange the seating one more time. Beatrice stopped her with professional politeness. I moved through it all quietly, invisibly, like a conductor guiding a tense symphony. Each failed attempt to control left Mom more frustrated, more panicked. The walls were closing in, and she could feel it, but couldn't stop it. Marcus's mother pulled me aside at one point, smiling warmly. "You're handling this beautifully," she said. "I wish I'd been as strong as you when I was planning my wedding." I sat alone in my childhood bedroom, journal open on my lap. I wrote everything down. Every slight, every dismissal, every time I'd been made to feel small. The time Mom forgot my college graduation because Vanessa had a minor dental appointment. The time she gave away my childhood bedroom to Vanessa without asking. The time she told relatives I was just working retail when I'd been promoted to assistant manager. Page after page filled with memories I'd buried, tried to forget. But remembering was important now. This wasn't about revenge. It was about finally seeing clearly, understanding the pattern, recognizing that Mom's behavior wasn't normal or acceptable. My anger wasn't wrong. My boundaries weren't cruel. I closed the journal and felt something settle in my chest. Clarity, purpose, the determination to never let anyone make me invisible again. I placed the journal in a drawer, knowing I wouldn't need to read it again. The act of writing had been enough. Uncle Thomas pulled me aside at the rehearsal dinner. He was Mom's younger brother, quieter than the rest of the family, thoughtful. "Clara," he said gently, "I know what your mother is like. I grew up with her." His words surprised me. "I want to help. Financially, emotionally, whatever you need. But only if you keep control of those heirlooms." I stared at him, shocked. "She'll use them to control you forever if you give in now," he continued. "I've watched her do it to everyone. Your grandmother did it to her, and now she's doing it to you. Break the cycle." His offer wasn't about money. It was about alliance, about someone finally choosing me. My network was strengthening, quietly and strategically. "Thank you," I whispered. He squeezed my shoulder. "You're stronger than she ever was. Don't forget that." Later, he slipped me a small velvet box. Inside were beautiful pearl earrings that had belonged to his late wife. "Something that's actually yours," he said. "No strings attached." The rehearsal dinner was elegant, understated, exactly what Marcus and I wanted. Mom arrived in an expensive dress, costume jewelry glittering at her throat and wrists. She'd clearly expected me to cave at the last moment, to hand over the heirlooms before the ceremony. When I walked in wearing simple pearls, her face froze. Panic flashed in her eyes, quick and unmistakable. The other guests noticed the tension, but couldn't quite identify its source. They saw Mom's tight smile, her distracted responses, the way her hands kept touching her throat where the sapphire necklace should have been. But they didn't understand the war being waged in silence. I moved through the evening with calm grace, accepting congratulations, laughing at jokes, holding Marcus's hand. Every moment of my composure was a statement. Every smile said, "I'm in control now. You can't touch me." When Mom tried to pull me aside, I politely excused myself to greet other guests. She stood alone for a moment, looking lost. Beatrice leaned close during dinner, her voice barely audible. "You're rewriting how family power works," she murmured. "I've planned 200 weddings, and I've never seen someone handle manipulation this gracefully." I smiled internally, savoring the validation. It wasn't easy. Every instinct trained into me screamed to apologize, to smooth things over, to make Mom happy at my own expense. But I'd learned something crucial. My happiness mattered too. My wedding mattered. My boundaries mattered. The precision of my planning, the careful way I'd anticipated every manipulation attempt, it was all paying off. Mom tried to pull me aside twice. I politely excused myself, both times. Vanessa watched from across the room, confusion and something like admiration on her face. The invisible war I'd been waging was becoming visible, and I was winning. Marcus's best friend gave a toast about finding your person, about building a life with someone who sees you. He didn't know how much those words meant to me in that moment. The morning of my wedding dawned, clear and perfect. I woke early, calm settling over me like a blanket. Today was the day. Today, all the planning, all the quiet resistance, all the boundaries I'd fought to maintain would culminate in something beautiful. Mom's choice of costume jewelry hadn't gone unnoticed. Aunt Helen had made a pointed comment. Vanessa had tried to cover, suggesting Mom's pieces were vintage. But everyone knew. Everyone could see that something was off, that the expected dominance and control weren't materializing. Mom's face was tight with forced smiles as she got ready, her movements sharp and frustrated. The attention she'd craved, the admiration she'd expected, it was slipping through her fingers like water, and she couldn't understand why. I did, though. I understood perfectly. This was consequence meeting entitlement. This was justice, quiet and complete. My bridesmaids surrounded me, helping with my dress, my hair, creating a protective circle of genuine love and support. Every glance, every whisper among the guests built Mom's anxiety. I could see it in the way she kept adjusting her jewelry, touching her hair, seeking reassurance that wasn't coming. Relatives who usually fawned over her were focused on me, on the bride, as they should be. I stayed calm, centered, unshakable. My bridesmaids surrounded me with love and support, their loyalty clear. Marcus's family welcomed me with genuine warmth. The contrast was stark. Mom had spent years building an image of control, of being the matriarch everyone deferred to. But today that image was crumbling. Not because I'd attacked it, but because I'd simply stopped supporting it. I'd stopped making myself smaller so she could feel bigger. Every measured step I took, every calm breath, reinforced my control. The power had shifted completely, and there was no going back. I caught my reflection in a mirror and barely recognized myself. Not because I looked different, but because I looked free. The ceremony was perfect. Sunlight streamed through the windows. Music swelled at exactly the right moments, and Marcus's eyes filled with tears when he saw me in my dress. The heirloom jewelry stayed locked away. I wore the simple pearls Uncle Thomas had given me that morning, along with diamond earrings Marcus had surprised me with. They were mine, chosen for me, not symbols of family obligation or control. I walked down the aisle with my head high, my steps steady. Mom sat in her assigned seat, her expression a mask of barely controlled emotion. Vanessa sat beside her, quiet and subdued. As I passed them, I felt nothing but calm certainty. This moment, this day, this marriage, it was all mine. Not theirs to control, not theirs to diminish. Mine. The word felt powerful, liberating. My wedding, my choice, my life. Finally, Marcus took my hand at the altar, and his smile told me he understood everything. He'd watched me fight this battle, and he was proud. After the ceremony, I found Mom sitting alone in a side room, staring at an empty jewelry box she'd brought. I realized. She'd brought it hoping I'd change my mind at the last second, hoping I'd given like I always had. But the box sat empty, mocking her assumptions. Anger had drained from her face, replaced by disbelief and something that might have been understanding. Her arrogance, her certainty that she could control me forever, it had orchestrated her own defeat. I stood in the doorway, watching her. I didn't gloat. I didn't speak. I simply observed, letting her sit with the consequences of years of manipulation. Silence, I'd learned, was louder than any argument, more powerful than any accusation. After a moment, I turned and walked away. She didn't call after me. We both knew something fundamental had changed between us, something that could never be undone. The old Clara would have rushed in, apologized, tried to fix her pain. The new Clara understood that some pain is earned. The reception was magical. I danced with Marcus, laughed with friends, accepted congratulations from guests who genuinely celebrated our love. No one questioned my authority or my decisions. No one tried to undermine my happiness. Mom made one final attempt at a power play, approaching Beatrice to demand the jewelry's location. Beatrice, professional and firm, informed her that all valuables were secured and only accessible by the bride. Mom's public dignity cracked visibly. Several guests witnessed the exchange, confusion evident on their faces. She realized then, fully and finally, that she had lost. Not just the jewelry, not just control of the wedding, but something deeper. My automatic deference, my willingness to be manipulated, my fear of her disapproval. All of it was gone. I watched from across the room as she walked away, shoulders slumped. Victory didn't feel like triumph. It felt like freedom, like finally being able to breathe after holding my breath for 28 years. Marcus spun me on the dance floor, and I laughed, genuinely and completely happy. Vanessa found me in the bridal suite later. Mascara streaked down her cheeks. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't see it before. How she treated you. How I let her treat you." I pulled her into a hug, measured and genuine. "It's not personal," I said quietly. "It's about fairness, about respect, about not accepting cruelty just because it comes from family." She nodded against my shoulder, her sobs slowing. Something shifted between us in that moment. Years of resentment began to crack, not disappearing but becoming manageable. "I love you," she said. "I love you too," I replied. And I meant it. This wasn't about destroying my family. It was about teaching them that love without respect isn't really love. That tradition doesn't excuse manipulation, that I mattered just as much as anyone else. Vanessa pulled back, wiping her eyes. "You're so much stronger than I ever realized." I smiled. I had to be. She stayed with me for a while, and we talked like we hadn't in years. Real conversation, not performance. It felt like finding something I'd thought was lost forever. 6 months later, life had found a new rhythm. Marcus and I built our home together, filling it with laughter and genuine partnership. The heirloom jewelry stayed in my safe, a symbol not of family obligation, but of my right to choose. Mom and I spoke occasionally, brief calls that stayed surface level. The warmth was gone, but so was the toxicity. She never apologized, but I didn't need her to. I'd made peace with who she was, and who she'd never be. Vanessa visited sometimes, our relationship slowly healing. She'd started setting her own boundaries with Mom, inspired by watching me. Uncle Thomas sent cards on holidays, always with a note reminding me how proud he was. The family's arrogance hadn't disappeared entirely, but my world had fundamentally shifted. I'd retained control of my wedding, my heirlooms, my self-respect. Most importantly, I'd learned that power isn't taken in anger. It's claimed in clarity, defended with calm, and maintained through unwavering boundaries. I walked away from that chapter unbroken, thriving, finally at peace. And the lesson I carried forward was simple. Respect yourself enough to enforce your worth, even when the people who should love you most expect you to yield. Especially then, because in the end, the person you have to live with every day is yourself. And I'd finally learned to look myself in the mirror with pride.